everyone. Thank you for joining me this week to my weekly session where I sit and tell you guys about a movie I've seen in the theater recently. It's either always going to be a blockbuster film that's just come out or an independent film. And recently I have gone to the movies to see A Quiet Place. And let me tell you, A Quiet Place is the most original movie I have seen in 2018, but it's the most original movie I've seen since not A Quiet Place, but since Get Out. So if the producers for A Quiet Place don't have an Oscar campaign set up yet, they really need to get started because it's definitely a contender for Best Original Screenplay next year at the Oscars. So A Quiet Place is written by Brian Woods, Scott Beck, and John Krasinski. But the original writers are Brian Woods and Scott Beck. And then John Krasinski came in as a director and made changes and added to the script. So basically, A Quiet Place is about a dystopian time in the future when aliens or some creatures have come and invaded the earth, and these creatures are blind. So the only way they can attack you is if they hear you. And basically, if they hear you, they're going to come and attack. And there's a particular family who owns a farm, and they seem to be the only people in their area, or one of the few families that have survived, because it makes it pretty clear in the beginning of the movie that most of the population has been depleted or are either in hiding. So what I want to talk to you about with A Quiet Place, the things that stood out to me the most were the use of sound and the creation of tension by foreshadowing. And basically, tension, the definition of that is what makes the audience want to stay and watch to see what happens next. And when you're reading a script, tension is the thing that makes you want to keep turning the page to see what's happening. So in A Quiet Place, I just want to point out how important sound is. One of my favorite screenwriting books is called Screenwriting from the Heart by James Ryan. And one of the things that I noticed, this is one of the screenwriting books I've read early on in my career, and one of the things that I noticed about this book is that they dedicate a whole chapter to sound. And A Quiet Place really uses sound, or a lack of sound, to create tension in the movie. One of the things I love the movie from the opening scene. In the first scene, there are no lines, basically. It's pretty much just silence. And I love what they do with the sound design, because you can hear their feet slapping against the grocery store or general store's floor. And that's pretty much the only sound you hear. You hear very, very tiny sounds like that. And like when the mother moves a bottle of pills, you kind of hear the pills tap against each other inside the bottle. It's a very creative use of sound. Also, what they do in the film, there is a deaf character in the film. Their teenage daughter is deaf, and in the first scene I realized what they were doing. When they would show her, the sound would sound like what she hears, which is nothing. And at first I thought, oh, did the sound person leave the plug out of the camera or something? Because it sounded like one of my short films where I made a mistake in the sound. But then I realized they were doing that on purpose, because that's what it sounds like to her. And then when we would see the hearing characters, we would experience what it sounded like to them. But let me talk more about this first scene. So in this first scene, we get all the information that we need to know. We know that there's a family of 5. They're shopping in what looks like a deserted store, because all of the shelves are pretty much empty. They're there out of desperation. They're not looters or thieves, because we see that one of their children is sick and they're trying to get pills for that little boy. And we see all of this through action, through their interactions with each other, through the tiptoeing through the aisles. That's a lot of information to gather in the first scene with pretty much no dialogue. And I thought that was really well done. And when I saw that first scene, I knew I was going to love this movie. Second of all, like I said earlier, they create a lot of tension with the sound. Usually in movies, the tension is created in a horror movie or a monster movie with the music. And one of the things I really liked about the sound design in this movie is that they did have music. Even though there wasn't a whole lot of verbal audible dialogue, there was a soundtrack, there was a score for the movie. And I like about this movie, like usually in horror movies and monster movies, as I said earlier, the tension is created by the music. But in A Quiet Place, the tension is created by the silence. And for people who don't like to sit in a room by themselves in silence, you can know how scary that might be. One of the things I liked about, I'm going to talk about 3 examples where they set up tension in the story, and then how they use foreshadowing to create even more tension. The first example I want to talk about is the spaceship. In that first scene, they have 5 people in the family. The youngest child is probably about 4 or 5 years old. He brings the spaceship and presents it to his family, and his dad basically tells him, no, you can't have this, but he goes like, and then kind of like puts the toy aside. And before he does that, he takes the batteries out so that it doesn't make any sound. Okay, so when the family is about to leave the store, the older sister, in a gesture of kindness to her baby brother, she takes the spaceship and she gives it back to him and basically tells him, between us, you can have this. But when they're walking out the store, the little boy takes the batteries. Okay, so that's creating tension because it makes us, we know it's going to come back up again later just because we're well versed at watching movies. Okay, so we see that he's taking the battery, so we're just waiting for the payoff for that setup. And it comes in the next scene when they're walking home and they're walking through the woods. The little boy puts the batteries into the spaceship. And I promise, this is the only spoiler I'm going to give. He puts the batteries in the spaceship, and then the creature comes and attacks him. His father is unable to save him. This scene also sets up the emotional part of the story, the inner conflict that the family ends up dealing with, the loss of this youngest child. So that's one example where they create tension and foreshadowing. And the second one that I want to talk about is the whole thing with the nail on the stairs. There's a long nail sticking out from the stairs. The mom is in the basement doing laundry. She comes up the stairs. She has like this huge sack of laundry. And she comes up the stairs and the sack of laundry gets stuck on the stairs. This creates tension because it does make a sound when she's kind of like yanking at the bag of laundry to get it off. It creates a sound, and so that's tension created once. And you kind of think like, oh, okay, maybe this is the only time you're not really as cognizant that it's a setup, which I think is great because when it actually turns into a payoff later on, it wasn't so predictable. Okay, so that's one time when that nail causes a sound to be made and you're kind of like, okay, are they going to come and get her? And then the second time is when she's walking down the steps again, and they walk around barefoot so that they don't make a lot of noise. So the second time she's coming down the stairs, she steps on this nail, and again the nail causes a sound. And so that was creating tension, and it was foreshadowing, and it was a setup and a payoff. The other thing I want to talk about in terms of creating tension is the fact that after like maybe 15 minutes into the movie, time passes and the mother is pregnant. Okay, and so she's pregnant and we already got the setup where they can't make any sounds. So we're like, oh my gosh, she's pregnant. What would happen if she went into labor? Yes, right? Because who has a silent labor? I think the way they dealt with this was completely original, completely creative, and like I said, I'm not going to spoil it for you. So you got to go see this movie so you can see what happens, how they deal with the fact that the mom is pregnant, and she's like pregnant. Like they set up in the story that she's about to give birth like in a couple of weeks. So, we have a feeling, yes, they're setting this up for us. We're going to get to experience this, and we're going to see how they deal with the pregnancy in terms of not being able to make a sound so that they're not attacked. All right, I've talked enough about this movie. I feel like this video is a little longer than usual, but it had to be because there were things that I was just so excited to talk about. So basically, go to the movies, go see A Quiet Place. This was a good one. Learn how silence works in terms of creating sound in your screenplay and how you work with that. And then look for the foreshadowing and the tension that's set up by the foreshadowing. Again, I try to keep these videos short. Sorry, this one went a little over this week. My name is Joy Cheriel Brown. If you want to get coaching from me, I do offer coaching. We could do a discovery session, and that discovery session is free. You can reach out to me either at joy.cheriel.brown@gmail.com, or you can reach out to me through my website at www.thirdpersonomniscientproductions. And if you like this video, as always, please like, share, and subscribe. Thank you for joining me this week, and I'll see you next week. Thanks.